In the deep blue dark, a pack of killer whales circles the ocean's most powerful predator and backs away. You're about to meet an animal so massive, so strong, that even an orca thinks twice. We are talking about the sperm whale, a creature with the biggest brain on Earth, a tail that can crack a boat in half, and a defense no other animal on this planet uses. Tonight we dive into a ring of whales locked head to head, a cloud of waste that stopped a hunt in its tracks, and a real ship torn apart by a single furious whale. If deep ocean mysteries pull you in, like and subscribe because we are just getting started. Take a breath. We go down now. A pod of killer whales locks eyes on the largest hunter in the sea, then turns away. For most of the ocean, that sentence makes no sense. Orcas rule everywhere they swim. They take down great white sharks. They pull seals off ice floats. They hunt in packs smarter than almost any predator on Earth, and nothing stands in their way for long, except one animal. The sperm whale is not the biggest creature in the sea. That title belongs to the blue whale, a giant that eats nothing but tiny shrimp and never fights back. The sperm whale is different. It hunts. It has teeth the size of bananas. And when an orca pod shows up looking for a meal, the sperm whale does not just survive the encounter. Most of the time, it wins. Marine biologists have watched this standoff again and again off the coasts of California, Australia and Sri Lanka. Killer whales approach fast, testing the group, circling like boxers looking for an opening. Then, more often than not, they pull back. No blood, no kill, just a slow retreat into open water. Why would the ocean's most feared predator walk away from a fight it usually wins? The answer is not simple, and it is not just about muscle. It is about brains, bonds, and a set of defenses that took millions of years to build. Some of those defenses sound almost too strange to be real. One involves the largest brain of any animal that has ever lived. Another involves a weapon every teenager already knows the smell of. To understand why orcas back off, you first need to understand what they are actually looking at. A sperm whale is not one lonely giant floating in the dark. It is part of a tight family unit. A group of mothers, aunts and calves that have stayed together for years, sometimes for life. Attack one, and you are not fighting one whale. You're fighting a coordinated team that trained for this moment long before the orcas ever arrived. That teamwork changes everything. A single seal has no plan when an orca appears. A single fish just swims and hopes. But a sperm whale family has a plan, built into instinct and passed down through generations. The moment danger shows up, that plan clicks into gear like a fire drill the whole group has run 1,000 times before. Picture your school running a fire drill so many times that nobody needs to think anymore. The bell rings and every student already knows where to walk. Sperm whales have something close to that, except the alarm is not a bell. It is the sound of an orca's calls travelling through the water, and the drill is not walking to a parking lot. It is forming a wall of muscle and bone around the smallest members of the family. Scientists who study these whales describe families that stay together for decades. Daughters stay near their mothers long after they are grown. Aunts help watch calves that are not even their own. When one whale spots danger, the whole group hears about it within seconds, because sperm whales talk to each other constantly, using sharp clicking sounds that carry for miles underwater. This is the story of that plan. It is a story about a tail strong enough to break bone, a brain built for strategy, and a defense so unexpected that scientists who witnessed it thought they were looking at something else entirely. It starts with something every orca already knows and every sperm whale never forgets. Size is not the whole story. Strategy is. Picture two animals lined up side by side. One is an orca, sleek and fast, built like a torpedo with teeth. The other is a sperm whale shaped more like a giant log with a jaw underneath. On paper, the orca looks like the better fighter. It is faster. It is more agile. It hunts in packs with a level of coordination that terrifies almost everything in the sea. But a fight in the ocean is never just about who moves faster. A single male sperm whale can grow longer than a school bus and weigh more than 10 elephants combined. An orca, even a large one, weighs a fraction of that. If this were a boxing match, it would be like matching a middleweight against a heavyweight 3 times his size. Speed helps. It does not always win. Weight matters underwater in a way it does not on land, because every collision carries the full force of that mass behind it. When a sperm whale swings its tail, it is not just moving fast. It is throwing the weight of a school bus through the water in a single strike. Orcas know this. Their entire hunting strategy depends on avoiding a direct hit, because one solid hit could end the fight before it starts. This is why orca attacks on large prey almost never look like a straight charge. Watch orcas hunt a great white shark and you will see them flip it upside down first, using a trick that shuts down the shark's ability to move. Watch them hunt a seal and you will see them work in teams, wearing the animal down before moving in. Orcas do not rely on raw power. They rely on outsmarting whatever stands in front of them. Against a sperm whale, that strategy runs into a problem. You cannot easily flip an animal the size of a school bus. You cannot easily trap a group that fights back as one unit instead of scattering in panic. The usual playbook, the one that works on nearly everything else in the ocean, starts to fall apart. Here is the part that changes the entire calculation. An orca pod does not just need power to win this fight. It needs to win without getting hurt, because an injured orca in the open ocean can starve, can fall behind its pod, can die from wounds that would heal easily on land but never fully close in salt water. A sperm whale does not need to kill an orca to win this exchange. It only needs to make the cost too high. That single idea, cost versus reward, explains almost everything that happens next. And it starts with the one part of a sperm whale's body built to make that cost brutally clear. Somewhere beneath the surface, a sperm whale swings its tail once, and the water around it explodes into foam. That single motion is the reason most predators think twice before getting close. Most animals in the ocean rely on speed or teeth to fight back. A sperm whale relies on physics. Water is roughly 800 times denser than air, which means every strike delivered underwater carries far more force than the same motion would on land. A punch thrown in a swimming pool barely moves the water in front of it. A sperm whale's tail, swung with the full weight of the animal behind it, pushes an entire wall of water forward with enough force to crack bone on impact. A sperm whale's tail, called a fluke, spans wider than a king-size bed, and is built almost entirely from dense muscle. It is not just a paddle for swimming. It is one of the most dangerous weapons in the entire ocean. Think of it like a sledgehammer attached to an animal the size of a city bus. A sledgehammer works because all the force of a swing lands on one small point. A sperm whale's fluke works the same way, except the swing carries the weight of tons of muscle behind it, moving through water dense enough to carry that force in every direction at once. Whalers in the 1800s learned this lesson the hard way. Small wooden boats sent out to hunt sperm whales were sometimes smashed apart by a single tail strike, flipped end over end like toys in a bathtub. Sailors who survived these encounters described the sound of splintering wood before they even understood what had happened. Orcas are far tougher than a wooden boat, but they are not invincible. A direct hit from a sperm whale's fluke could crack ribs, damage internal organs, or knock an orca unconscious long enough to sink. In an environment where every predator needs to keep swimming just to breathe, an injury like that can turn deadly within minutes. This is why orcas rarely approach a sperm whale head-on, and almost never approach the tail. Instead, they circle, watching, waiting for a moment when the tail is turned away. It is the same instinct a person feels standing near a horse. You do not walk up behind it and expect nothing to happen. Sperm whales seem to know exactly how much power they are carrying. Footage of these standoffs shows whales angling their bodies so their tails face outward, toward any threat that gets too close. It looks almost like a soldier keeping a weapon aimed and ready, except this weapon never needs to be loaded. A single tail is dangerous enough on its own. But a sperm whale is rarely alone when trouble arrives. When an entire family points its tails outward at once, something forms in the water that looks less like a group of animals and more like a fortress built from muscle and bone. That fortress has a name, and it is where this story turns from raw power into pure strategy. A newborn sperm whale calf swims close to its mother, small enough to fit inside the shadow of her body. Biologists sometimes call this kind of social structure a matrilineal society, meaning it is organized entirely around the females and passed down through the mother's line. Elephants on land form similar groups, led by related females who cooperate to raise young and defend the herd from lions or hyenas. The parallel is not a coincidence. Long-lived, intelligent animals facing serious predators again and again across their lifetime tend to land on remarkably similar social solutions, whether they are walking across grassland or swimming through open ocean. Sperm whale families do not look like most animal groups you might picture. There is no single leader barking orders. There is no random collection of strangers passing through the same patch of ocean. A sperm whale family, called a unit, is closer to a group of sisters and cousins who never moved out of the house, raising their children together across decades. These units usually hold somewhere between 5 and 20 whales, almost all of them female, along with their calves. Adult males leave the group once they are old enough, heading off to live alone or in loose groups of other males, only returning to breed. The females stay. They hunt together, travel together, and when danger arrives, they defend each other without hesitation. This matters more than it might sound like at first. Compare it to a herd of deer, where every animal mostly looks out for itself and scatters the moment a predator shows up. A sperm whale unit does the opposite. When a threat appears, the group tightens instead of scattering, pulling closer together instead of running in every direction. Think of it like the difference between a crowd fleeing a fire alarm and a group of firefighters walking toward the flames together. One reaction is chaos, the other is coordination. Sperm whales choose coordination, and that choice alone removes one of the biggest advantages a predator normally has. Orcas, like most hunters, are built to exploit panic. Wolves separate one deer from the herd. Lions isolate one zebra from the group. Orcas do the same thing to seals, dolphins, and fish, using speed and numbers to split a target away from the safety of its friends. It is a strategy that has worked for millions of years because most animals panic and run when threatened. Sperm whales break that pattern entirely. Instead of splitting apart, they lock together, calves and juveniles pulled toward the center, adults forming a living wall around them. An orcapod expecting chaos instead finds something closer to a fortress, with no obvious weak point. This does not mean sperm whales never lose a member of the group. It happens, and later in this story you will see exactly how. But the odds shift dramatically the moment a family works as one unit instead of every whale for itself. Understanding why orcas hesitate starts with understanding exactly who they are actually facing. Not one whale, not even several separate whales. A single defensive structure built from years of trust, about to be tested by the ocean's most feared hunters. Not every sperm whale is equally safe from an orca attack, and every experienced orcapod knows exactly where the weak point is hiding. A calf's vulnerability is not just about size, it is also about experience. An adult sperm whale has spent years, sometimes decades, learning how to read the ocean around it, recognizing the difference between a curious dolphin and an approaching threat. A calf has none of that experience yet, relying almost entirely on the adults around it to notice danger early enough to react. This makes the first year of a sperm whale's life, statistically, the most dangerous stretch of its entire lifespan. Adult sperm whales, especially large males, are close to untouchable. Their size alone makes an attack too costly for most orcapods to attempt. But calves are a different story entirely. A newborn sperm whale is roughly the length of a car, tiny compared to its mother, and without the strength or experience to defend itself. This is where orcas focus almost all of their attention. Killer whale pods that specialize in hunting large prey have been recorded targeting calves specifically, ignoring the adults around them whenever possible. It is a strategy built on patience rather than power, similar to how lions on the savannah often wait for the youngest or weakest member of a herd, rather than risking injury against a fully grown animal capable of fighting back. For a sperm whale family, this creates constant pressure. A calf cannot dive as deep as an adult. It cannot hold its breath nearly as long, and it needs to surface far more often to breathe. Every trip to the surface is a moment of exposure, a brief window where the calf is separated from the deep water safety its family usually relies on. Mothers do not leave that window unguarded. Sperm whale calves are almost never seen swimming completely alone. An adult, often the mother herself, stays close during every surface visit, watching the water around them the way a lifeguard watches a beach. Even with constant supervision, the threat never fully disappears. Orcapods have been recorded testing sperm whale groups for hours, circling from a distance, watching for any moment when a calf drifts even slightly away from the protective wall of adults. It is less like a sudden ambush, and more like a slow, patient siege. This patience is exactly why the defensive formation you learned about earlier matters so much. Without it, a family travelling together with a vulnerable calf would be an easy target, worn down over hours until an opening finally appeared. With it, that same family becomes something closer to an armoured convoy, calves tucked safely in the middle, while the strongest members face outward toward the threat. Marine biologists have watched this play out in real encounters, orcas probing again and again for hours without ever finding the gap they need. Sometimes they eventually succeed. Most of the time, they do not. To understand why the odds tilt so heavily toward the sperm whales, you need to see exactly what that protective wall looks like once it fully forms, because it is unlike almost anything else in the animal kingdom. The moment danger closes in, something remarkable happens beneath the waves. A scattered group of whales pulls together into a shape scientists call the Marguerite Formation, named after a flower with petals radiating out from a central point. Picture a wagon wheel floating in open water. The hub sits in the center, and the spokes stretch outward in every direction. Now replace the hub with the smallest, most vulnerable whales in the group, and replace the spokes with the massive tails of the adults, all pointed outward like loaded weapons aimed at anything that gets too close. It is a coordinated maneuver, and sperm whales seem to fall into position almost instantly once a threat is detected, with nothing resembling random panic. Heads point inward toward the center of the circle. Tails fan outward, ready to strike anything that tries to break through. Think about why this works so well. Earlier you learned that a sperm whale's tail is one of the most dangerous weapons in the ocean, capable of shattering wood and injuring far tougher animals than a small wooden boat. Now imagine 6 or 7 of those weapons, all facing outward at once, all ready to swing the instant something crosses the line. An orca approaching this formation is not looking at one dangerous animal anymore. It is looking at a wall of them, with no safe angle of attack. Come in from any direction, and a tail is waiting. There is no blind spot, no gap in the defense, nothing resembling the isolated, panicked prey that orcas are built to hunt. Compare this to how a herd of musk oxen defends against wolves on the Arctic tundra. Musk oxen form a tight circle too, horns facing outward, calves tucked safely inside. Wolves that once found an easy meal in a single ox suddenly face an impossible wall of horns from every direction. The Marguerite Formation works on the exact same principle, just underwater, with tails instead of horns. Scientists first documented this behavior decades ago, watching sperm whale families respond to approaching orca pods with a speed that suggested pure instinct rather than conscious decision-making. The formation seems to be built into sperm whale biology itself, a defense passed down through countless generations of encounters with predators. It is not a perfect defense, nothing in nature ever is, but it forces every orca pod to make a difficult choice. Attack a fortress with weapons pointed in every direction, risking serious injury for an uncertain reward, or look elsewhere for an easier meal. Most of the time, orcas choose the second option. But sometimes, when hunger outweighs caution, they test the formation anyway, probing for any weakness they can find. What happens next depends entirely on how well that wall of tails holds together under pressure. An orca darts toward the edge of the Marguerite Formation, testing for an opening, and gets exactly nothing for the effort. This kind of standoff can stretch on far longer than most people would expect from a life or death encounter. Some documented cases have lasted well over an hour, with orcas circling patiently, waiting for even the smallest crack to appear. Patience is one of the orca's greatest hunting tools, honed through generations of stalking prey that eventually tires or makes a mistake. Against a formation built specifically to prevent mistakes, though, that patience often runs out before the sperm whale's defences ever do. The genius of this defence is not just the shape. It is what the shape does to an attacker's options. Every direction an orca might approach from is covered by at least one adult whale, tail cocked and ready. There is no easy angle, no unguarded side, no moment where the calves at the centre sit exposed. Compare this to trying to steal a cookie from the middle of a table surrounded by people on every side, all of them watching, all of them ready to grab your hand the instant you reach in. The obstacle is not one person. It is the fact that reaching from any direction puts you within arm's reach of somebody. Orcas are intelligent enough to recognize this problem almost immediately. Pods that specialize in hunting large, dangerous prey often spend hours studying a target before committing to an attack, looking for any sign of weakness. Against a tight Marguerite Formation, that weakness is difficult to find. The whales inside the ring reinforce each other constantly. If one adult drifts slightly out of position, another often shifts to cover the gap, almost like players on a defense line adjusting when a teammate steps out of place. This constant small correction keeps the wall solid, even as the whales tire or the orcas change their angle of attack. There is another layer to this defense that is easy to miss. Sperm whales inside the formation are not silent. They continue clicking to each other throughout the standoff, sharing information about where the threat is moving. In near total darkness, hundreds of feet underwater, sound becomes more valuable than sight, and a constant stream of clicks lets every whale in the group track the danger without needing to see it directly. This means an orca cannot simply sneak around to a blind spot because there really is no blind spot. The whole formation is essentially one connected sensor, constantly updating, constantly aware of exactly where the threat sits relative to every member of the group. Faced with this level of coordination, many orca attacks simply fizzle out. The pod circles for a while, tests a few angles, finds nothing promising, and eventually swims off toward easier prey. Researchers have documented standoffs lasting well over an hour that end this way, with no injuries on either side and no meal for the orcas. But not every standoff ends peacefully. Sometimes, despite every advantage the formation provides, cracks begin to show. Even the strongest fortress has moments of weakness, and the Marguerite formation is no exception. A ring of whales can only hold together as long as every member stays in position, and that becomes harder the longer a standoff drags on. Whales get tired. Currents push bodies out of alignment. A calf that panics might drift a few feet from the group at exactly the wrong moment, and a few feet is sometimes all an experienced orcapod needs. Researchers studying one documented attack off the coast of California watched exactly this scenario unfold. Killer whales pressed a group of sperm whales for hours, probing again and again, until finally isolating one whale that had drifted slightly away from the protective ring. The orcas moved in immediately, using speed and numbers to keep the isolated whale separated from its family. What followed was not a quick kill. It was a prolonged struggle, with the sperm whale's family attempting repeatedly to reach their isolated member, sometimes breaking their own formation to do it. 2 adults were seen leaving the safety of the group entirely, swimming out to flank the surrounded whale and try to lead it back towards safety. That decision carried enormous risk. Leaving the formation meant exposing themselves to the exact danger the ring was built to prevent. But sperm whale families do not appear to calculate risk the way a purely selfish animal might. They calculated the cost of losing a family member instead, and decided the danger was worth facing. Despite these efforts, the isolated whale in this particular encounter did not survive. It stands as one of the few confirmed cases of orcas successfully killing a full-grown sperm whale, and it proves something important. The defenses you have learned about so far are powerful, but they are not invincible. Sperm whales are not immune to predation. They are simply very difficult prey, which is an entirely different thing. This single documented kill changed how scientists understood the relationship between these two species. For decades, some researchers believed sperm whales were essentially untouchable, protected by size and teamwork alone. Watching an orcapod successfully break through that defense, after hours of coordinated effort, proved that the fear sperm whales show around orcas is not overblown. It is earned. It also revealed something else. An attack that takes hours, requires an entire pod working together, and still results in exposure and risk for the attackers is not a cheap victory. For every successful hunt like this one, there are countless failed attempts, standoffs that end with orcas swimming away hungry. The question worth asking is not why orcas sometimes win. It is why they lose so often against an animal they could theoretically overpower through sheer numbers. The answer takes us somewhere unexpected, into the largest brain that has ever existed on this planet. Somewhere in the skull of every sperm whale sits an organ larger than any brain that has ever existed, in any animal, in the entire history of life on this planet. A sperm whale's brain weighs around 18 pounds, roughly 6 times heavier than a human brain. For comparison, imagine carrying a bowling ball around inside your skull, except this bowling ball is packed with the neural wiring needed to coordinate a family of whales through a life-or-death standoff in near-total darkness. Bigger does not automatically mean smarter. A blue whale has a large brain too, but a much simpler social life, since it mostly eats alone and rarely needs complex coordination with others. What makes the sperm whale's brain remarkable is not just its size. It is what that size seems to be used for. Sperm whales live in complex multi-generational family units, communicate using distinct dialects that vary between different whale cultures around the world, and appear capable of coordinating defensive strategies that require every member of a group to respond correctly under pressure. That kind of social complexity typically demands serious brain power, the same way running a large team at school or work requires more mental coordination than working completely alone. Think about the Margaret formation you learned about a few minutes ago. Every whale needs to recognize the threat, understand its role in the group, and move into position quickly enough to close any gaps before an orca can exploit them. It requires tracking the positions of multiple other whales, responding to constant vocal updates, and adjusting behavior in real time as the situation changes, far beyond the simple instinct of a fish darting away from a shadow. Scientists studying sperm whale brains have found structures similar to those in humans that are linked to emotional processing, social bonding, and complex decision-making, though heavily modified for life underwater. Some researchers believe this may explain the extraordinarily strong family bonds seen in sperm whale units, bonds strong enough that adults will risk their own safety to rescue an isolated relative. This brainpower likely plays a direct role in why orcas hesitate before attacking. An easy target reacts predictably, panicking in ways a smart predator can exploit. A sperm whale family, coordinating through years of built-in social intelligence, does not behave predictably at all. Every attack an orcapod attempts might be met with a slightly different, well-organized response, making it far harder to develop a reliable playbook the way they can against simpler prey. There is a certain irony here worth sitting with. Orcas are widely considered among the most intelligent predators in the ocean, capable of complex hunting strategies passed down through generations of their own culture. Facing off against sperm whales means facing an opponent whose brainpower may actually rival their own, wrapped in a body built like a battering ram. Intelligence alone does not explain everything about this standoff, though. Sperm whales also carry a sense most humans can barely imagine, one built entirely around sound, and that sense might be the most important defense of all. In the crushing darkness hundreds of feet below the surface, sperm whales are having a conversation, and it never stops. Sound travels farther and faster underwater than light ever could, which makes it the primary language of the deep ocean. Sperm whales have taken this to an extreme, developing patterns of clicks called codas that function almost like words, carrying specific meaning between members of a family unit. Researchers who have spent years recording these clicks describe patterns that repeat with surprising consistency, almost like a rhythm or a phrase. Different family groups appear to use slightly different patterns, similar to regional accents among humans speaking the same underlying language. A sperm whale raised in one part of the ocean may click in a style noticeably different from one raised somewhere else entirely. This matters enormously during a standoff with orcas. The moment danger appears, sperm whales do not go silent to avoid detection the way you might expect. Instead, clicking often increases, spreading information about the threat's location and movement to every whale in the group almost instantly. Picture a group project where every teammate has a phone and can text updates constantly, versus a group where everyone has to guess what the others are doing. Sperm whales operate like the first group. The moment one whale spots the orca's shifting position, that information spreads through the family within seconds, letting the entire Marguerite formation adjust together instead of relying on guesswork. Orcas communicate too, using their own set of calls and whistles. But there is an important difference. Orca vocalizations tend to focus on coordinating an attack. Sperm whale codas appear to focus on coordinating a defense, tracking the position of family members, and possibly even communicating something like reassurance during a stressful encounter. Some researchers have gone further, suggesting that sperm whale clicks might carry enough complexity to represent something close to individual identity, almost like each whale having its own name that others in the group recognize. If true, this would mean a sperm whale family is not just reacting to danger as a group. Each member is being tracked, called, and coordinated with individually, all while an orcapod circles outside, hearing only sound it cannot interpret. This constant flow of information may be one of the most underappreciated reasons sperm whale defenses hold up so well under pressure. An orcapod attacking blind, unable to understand what the whales inside the formation are saying to each other, is fighting with one hand tied behind its back. But sound in a sperm whale's world is not just used for talking. It might also be one of the most powerful weapons in the entire animal kingdom, and for years scientists genuinely believed it could stop a killer whale cold. A single click from a sperm whale can reach 230 decibels underwater, and no other animal on this planet has ever been recorded producing a sound that loud. To understand how extreme this number really is, compare it to something familiar. A jet engine at takeoff, heard from the runway, measures around 140 decibels. A rifle fired right next to your ear reaches about 165. A sperm whale's click, measured underwater, blows past both of those numbers by a wide margin, making it the loudest sound produced by any living creature. This sound comes from a massive structure inside the sperm whale's head called the spermaceti organ, which takes up nearly a third of the animal's entire body length. Think of it like a built-in speaker system the size of a small car, capable of focusing sound into a tight, powerful beam and firing it forward like a flashlight beam made of noise instead of light. For decades, scientists suspected this sound might be more than just a tool for navigation. In the 1980s, a researcher named Kenneth Norris noticed something strange while studying sperm whale stomachs. Many contained giant squid with no visible bite marks and no signs of struggle, as if the squid had simply stopped moving before the whale ever touched them. Norris proposed an idea that captured public imagination for years. What if sperm whales were not just using their clicks to find prey in the darkness? What if they were using those same clicks as a weapon, blasting prey at close range with sound powerful enough to stun or even kill? The idea made a strange kind of sense. Picture standing in a room when someone sets off a flash grenade nearby. The blast of light and sound overwhelms your senses instantly, leaving you disoriented and unable to react for several crucial seconds. If a sperm whale's click could do something similar underwater, it would explain how such a massive, relatively slow-moving animal manages to catch fast, agile prey in complete darkness. This theory spread widely, appearing in documentaries and articles for decades, often presented as settled fact rather than an unproven idea. It fit perfectly with the picture of the sperm whale as an almost supernatural predator, armed with a built-in sonic weapon capable of disabling anything unlucky enough to be caught in its beam. If sound alone could stun prey at close range, the implications for an orca encounter seemed obvious. A concentrated blast from an entire family of clicking sperm whales might be enough to disorient an attacking orca, buying crucial time for the formation to hold or for calves to escape deeper into the water. It was a compelling idea. It captured the imagination of an entire generation of ocean documentaries. There was just one problem. When scientists finally tested it directly, the evidence told a very different story. For years, the idea of sperm whales stunning prey with sound sat comfortably in the category of confirmed fact, repeated so often that almost nobody questioned it. Then researchers actually went looking for proof, and the theory started falling apart. One team exposed squid directly to artificial clicks, designed to closely mimic a sperm whale's echolocation, using sound levels close to what these whales are capable of producing. If the stunning theory were true, the squid should have frozen, gone limp, or shown some clear sign of distress. Instead, the squid kept swimming normally, apparently unbothered by sound levels that should have been devastating according to the original theory. A separate and even more direct study attached recording tags to the noses of wild sperm whales, capturing exactly how their clicks changed during real hunting attempts. If sperm whales were using sound as a weapon, you would expect the loudest, most powerful clicks right before a strike, timed to stun prey at the critical moment of attack. The data showed the opposite pattern entirely. As sperm whales closed in on prey, their clicks actually grew quieter, not louder, shifting into a rapid buzzing pattern used for fine-tuned tracking rather than debilitation. It looked far more like a bat using echolocation to zero in on a moth than any kind of sonic weapon. Think of it like a phone camera. When you get closer to something you want to photograph, you do not need a brighter flash. You need better focus. Sperm whales appear to work the same way, trading raw power for precision as they close the distance on their target, rather than saving up a devastating blast for the final moment. This does not mean the loudest clicks in the animal kingdom serve no purpose at all. Researchers now believe the extreme volume exists primarily to extend range, letting a sperm whale detect prey and obstacles from much farther away in the pitch-black depths of the deep ocean, where sight becomes almost useless past a few dozen feet. A louder click simply travels farther before fading into background noise, the same way a shout carries across a larger space than a whisper. For an animal hunting alone in total darkness, sometimes thousands of feet below the surface, that extra range could mean the difference between finding a meal and starving. This shift in understanding matters for our story too. It means the defense sperm whales rely on during an orca encounter is probably not a sonic weapon capable of stunning attackers outright. The real defenses are the ones you already learned about: raw size, coordinated family bonds, a punishing tail, and a formation built to eliminate weak points. But if sound is not a weapon against orcas, it still plays another crucial role in these encounters, one that has nothing to do with stunning anyone at all. If sperm whale clicks are not a weapon, what exactly are they for, and why does an entire family increase its clicking the moment danger appears? The answer connects back to something you already learned. In near total darkness, hundreds of feet beneath the surface, sound is the only sense that works reliably at long range. Vision becomes nearly useless once sunlight fades away, but sound travels for miles through water, bouncing off solid objects and carrying detailed information back to anything listening closely enough. Sperm whales use their clicks primarily as a form of biological sonar, sending out sound waves and listening for the echo that bounces back. This lets them build a detailed picture of their surroundings using sound alone, similar to how a bat navigates a pitch-black cave by listening for echoes rather than relying on sight. During a standoff with orcas, this sonar ability becomes a form of constant surveillance. Every click sent out and echo received helps build a real-time map of exactly where every orca is positioned, how fast they are moving, and which direction they are approaching from. Combined with the coda clicks used for communication between family members, sperm whales essentially maintain a constant shared awareness of the entire battlefield. Picture a security team monitoring a building through a dozen different cameras, sharing updates constantly over radio. No single camera sees everything, but together the team builds a complete picture that lets them respond instantly to any threat. Sperm whales appear to manage something similar using sound instead of cameras, each whale contributing its own sonar picture to the group's shared understanding of the danger. This explains why the Marguerite Formation holds together so effectively even in complete darkness. The whales are not relying on sight to maintain their positions or track the threat. They are relying on a constant stream of sound, echoing and clicking back and forth, letting the entire group move and adjust almost as if they shared a single nervous system. There is another possibility worth considering, one that researchers are still exploring. Some scientists suspect that orcas, hearing this constant, overwhelming wall of sound coming from a tightly grouped sperm whale family, may find it more difficult to track individual whales within the formation. Rather than stunning the orcas outright, the noise might simply create enough acoustic confusion to make isolating a single target harder than it would otherwise be. Whether or not that theory holds up under further study, one thing is clear. Sound plays a defensive role in this standoff that has nothing to do with force and everything to do with information. In a fight where confusion can be fatal, the family that knows exactly where every member stands holds an enormous advantage over one that does not. But sound and formation are not the only tools sperm whales bring to this fight. Sometimes, before anything else happens, they try something far more direct. A warning, delivered the same way a person might slam a fist on a table before a fight ever starts. Before a single tail ever swings, sperm whales often try something simpler. They warn. Warnings like this appear throughout the animal kingdom for a simple reason. Fighting is expensive, even for the winner. An animal that can end a conflict through display alone without ever throwing a real strike saves energy it might desperately need later, whether for finding food, escaping a second threat, or simply recovering from the stress of the encounter. Evolution tends to favour behaviours that get the same result for a lower cost, and a loud, visible threat is almost always cheaper than an actual fight. Researchers who study these encounters have documented sperm whales snapping their jaws loudly when orcas approach. A sharp, cracking sound that carries easily through the water. Picture the sound a large dog makes snapping its jaws shut inches from your hand, a clear, unmistakable signal that says stay back, without a single word needing to be spoken. A sperm whale's jaw is lined with roughly 50 conical teeth, some growing over 8 inches long, set into a lower jaw that looks almost too narrow for the massive head above it. Snapping that jaw shut produces both a sound and a visible display, a reminder to any nearby predator of exactly what those teeth are capable of doing if the situation escalates further. Headbutting serves a similar purpose. Sperm whales have been observed ramming their enormous foreheads directly into threats, using the sheer mass of their skull as a blunt weapon, and there is nothing subtle about it. A sperm whale's head can make up close to a third of its entire body length, packed with dense tissue and the same spermaceti organ used for echolocation, making it a surprisingly effective battering ram when needed. Why bother with warnings at all, if a sperm whale's tail is already such an effective weapon? The answer comes back to something you learned earlier. Fighting carries risk for both sides, and reducing that risk without losing the fight entirely benefits everyone involved, including the sperm whale itself. Think about how a dog might growl and show its teeth before ever actually biting. That growl is not weakness, it is efficiency, a way of ending a conflict before real violence becomes necessary, saving energy and avoiding injury on both sides. Sperm whales appear to use jaw snapping and head displays for exactly this reason, offering orcas a chance to reconsider before things turn physical. Orcas are intelligent enough to read these signals clearly. A pod that has encountered these warnings before likely understands exactly what a snapping jaw or a lowered head means, and factors that understanding into their decision about whether to press forward or retreat. This does not mean warnings always work. Determined orca pods, especially ones desperate for a meal after a long stretch without success, sometimes push forward anyway, forcing the confrontation past the point of simple posturing. When that happens, sperm whales have one final option beyond fighting entirely. They can simply leave the fight altogether, heading somewhere no orca on Earth has ever been able to follow. While an orca pod struggles to stay in the fight, a sperm whale has an option no predator in the ocean can match. Few animals on the planet can even survive at these depths, let alone move through them with purpose. The extreme pressure alone would collapse the chest cavity of most air-breathing mammals almost instantly. Sperm whales handle it because their bodies evolved specifically around this environment, treating what would be a death sentence for nearly any other creature as simply another part of their daily routine, no different from a person walking down a familiar street. It can simply disappear straight down. Sperm whales are among the deepest diving mammals on the planet, capable of descending more than 3,000 feet below the surface, deep enough to reach total darkness, crushing pressure, and a world almost no sunlight has ever touched. For comparison, that depth is roughly the height of 2 Empire State Buildings stacked directly on top of each other, straight down into the black. Orcas, despite their reputation as fearsome ocean hunters, simply cannot follow. Most orca dives stay within a few hundred feet of the surface, occasionally pushing deeper for short bursts, but nowhere close to the extremes a sperm whale handles routinely. The difference is not a matter of willpower. It comes down to basic biology, lungs, blood chemistry, and body structures built for entirely different depths. Think of it like a swimming pool with a shallow end and a deep end that never stops getting deeper. Orcas are strong swimmers built for the shallow end, fast and powerful within a certain range. Sperm whales are built for the deep end, adapted over millions of years to handle pressure that would crush most other animals on the planet. This gives sperm whale families a genuine escape route that has nothing to do with fighting at all. If a standoff with orcas turns dangerous enough, whales can simply dive beyond the point where their attackers are physically capable of following, using depth itself as a form of protection no amount of speed or aggression can overcome. This escape route is not available at every moment, though. Diving to those extreme depths takes time, and calves in particular cannot descend as quickly or as deeply as fully grown adults. This is part of why the Marguerite Formation matters so much near the surface, buying enough time for the entire family, including its slowest and most vulnerable members, to eventually retreat into water no orca can reach. There is something almost poetic about this defense. The same crushing pressure that makes the deep ocean so hostile to most life becomes, for a sperm whale, the safest place in the entire sea. What kills nearly everything else on this planet within seconds is, for this one animal, simply home. 3,000 feet looks small written on a page. The environment down there belongs to a different planet entirely. Temperature drops sharply too, falling close to freezing even in tropical oceans where the surface water feels warm against your skin. Sperm whales manage this through a thick layer of blubber wrapped around their entire body, insulating them the same way a heavy winter coat protects a person walking through a snowstorm. Between the darkness, the cold, and the crushing pressure, almost nothing about this world resembles the sunlit surface waters most ocean documentaries choose to film. At that depth, the pressure pressing in from every direction is roughly 100 times greater than what you feel standing on a beach at sea level. Sunlight vanishes completely within the first few 100 feet, meaning a sperm whale spends much of its dive in absolute darkness, relying entirely on sound and touch to navigate a world no human eye has ever directly seen without the help of a submersible. Sperm whales handle this environment through a set of adaptations found almost nowhere else in the animal kingdom. Their lungs can collapse safely under pressure without causing damage, something that would badly injure most mammals. Their blood carries far more oxygen than a human's, and their muscles store extra oxygen directly, letting them function for over an hour without needing to breathe. Compare that to holding your breath underwater. Most people struggle to last even 1 minute before their body forces them back to the surface, gasping for air. A sperm whale can remain submerged more than 60 times longer, hunting, swimming, and if necessary, escaping danger the entire time. Orcas, by contrast, are built more like sprinters than marathon divers. Their dives typically last somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes before they need to return to the surface for air, a fraction of what a sperm whale can manage. Chasing prey into the deep ocean is simply not an option for them, no matter how motivated the hunt. This creates a hard limit on how an orca attack can unfold. Every minute a standoff drags out near the surface is a minute closer to the moment when sperm whales might simply choose to leave entirely, sinking into depths where pursuit becomes physically impossible. Orcas know this too, which adds pressure to attack quickly if they intend to attack at all, since waiting too long only increases the odds their prey escapes into the deep. This dynamic shapes the entire encounter from the very beginning. Rather than a leisurely hunt with unlimited time to find weaknesses, orcas are working against a clock they cannot control, racing against the moment when their target might vanish into a world they can never enter. For one type of sperm whale in particular, this vertical escape route combines with something else entirely, a level of individual power that makes an attack almost not worth attempting from the very start. Somewhere in open ocean, far from any pod, a fully grown male sperm whale swims completely alone, and very few animals on Earth would dare test him. Male sperm whales leave their family units once they reach adolescence, spending much of their adult lives travelling solo or in loose, temporary groups of other males, only returning to warmer waters to breed. These lone males grow significantly larger than females, sometimes stretching past 60 feet in length, roughly the size of a school bus and a half, with a body mass that can exceed 40 tons. An animal that size, travelling completely alone, might seem like an obvious target for a hunting orcapod. No family formation, no Marguerite ring of protective tails. Just one massive whale, seemingly vulnerable without the coordinated defence you learned about earlier. In practice, the opposite tends to be true. Orca attacks on solitary adult male sperm whales are exceptionally rare, and successful ones are rarer still. The reason comes back to something simple. This particular whale does not need a formation, because at that size, one whale essentially is the formation. Picture the size difference here clearly. A large male sperm whale can outweigh an entire pod of attacking orcas combined. Every one of the dangers you have already learned about, the crushing tail, the bone-jarring headbutt, the bite force of a jaw lined with teeth the length of a hand, all of it scales up dramatically in an animal this large. There is no calf to protect, no weak point in a formation to exploit, nothing except pure, overwhelming size facing down anything foolish enough to approach. This does not mean these giants are completely without risk in a fight. Even the largest male could theoretically be injured by a large determined orcapod willing to accept heavy losses for the attempt. But the math rarely works out in the orca's favour. The potential reward, a single meal, simply does not justify the near certainty of serious injury against an animal this size and this strong. There is a strange kind of freedom in this. While female sperm whales spend much of their lives coordinating tightly with family members, watching for threats, protecting calves, adult males largely trade that social safety net for raw physical dominance instead. Different strategies, shaped by different life stages, both arriving at roughly the same outcome. Orcas keep their distance. Stories about the raw power of a sperm whale this size are not limited to modern science either. Long before researchers understood any of the biology behind these encounters, sailors already knew exactly what one of these animals was capable of doing when pushed too far, and one true story from the age of whaling ships proves it better than any scientific paper ever could. In 1820, far from any coastline, a whaling ship called the Essex was struck twice by a single sperm whale and sent to the bottom of the ocean. The Essex was not a small boat. It stretched nearly 90 feet long, a sturdy wooden whaling ship built to survive years at sea, hunting exactly the kind of animal that eventually destroyed it. The crew had been chasing sperm whales successfully for months when an enormous male, estimated at around 85 feet long, larger than almost any sperm whale ever recorded before or since, appeared near the ship acting strangely calm. Then, without warning, the whale charged directly at the hull, ramming it with enough force to knock crew members off their feet. It backed away, seemed to gather itself, and charged a second time, this time with even greater speed, striking the bow directly and shattering the wooden planks below the waterline. Within minutes, water was pouring into the ship faster than the crew could manage. The Essex sank completely, leaving her entire crew stranded in small whaling boats thousands of miles from land. What followed became one of the most harrowing survival stories in maritime history, involving months adrift, starvation, and decisions so desperate that this real event later inspired the novel Moby Dick, one of the most famous stories ever written about the sea. For years, some historians questioned whether a whale could really sink a ship on purpose, wondering if the crew had simply misunderstood an accidental collision. But the first mate's detailed account, written shortly after the disaster, described a whale that appeared to deliberately position itself, gather speed, and strike with clear intent, behaviour that seemed calculated rather than random. Modern marine biologists studying sperm whale behaviour find this account entirely plausible. You already know these animals possess a brain built for complex problem solving, along with a skull dense enough to function as a natural battering ram. A 60-ton animal moving with purpose toward a wooden hull would generate more than enough force to cause exactly the kind of damage the Essex crew described. Think about what this means for the Orca standoffs you have learned about throughout this story. If a sperm whale is capable of deliberately destroying a 90-foot wooden ship built by human engineers, an orca measuring a fraction of that ship's size faces an animal capable of far more damage than most predators would ever risk testing. The Essex disaster remains one of the only documented cases of a whale intentionally attacking a much larger human-made vessel, and it offers a rare direct glimpse into just how much raw power a single sperm whale can bring to a fight when truly provoked. The story of the Essex is remarkable on its own, but its real value lies in what it reveals about the true scale of a sperm whale's capabilities. Consider the physics involved. The Essex weighed roughly 238 tons fully loaded, built from thick oak planks designed specifically to withstand the pounding of ocean storms and years of harsh use at sea. Sinking a ship built that solidly is not something achieved by accident or by a glancing blow. It requires focused, repeated, powerful force delivered precisely where it will do the most damage. The whale that attacked the Essex reportedly aimed directly at the bow, the strongest and most reinforced part of the ship, and still managed to crack it open on the second strike. This detail matters enormously. It suggests an animal identifying a target and delivering force with something resembling strategy, rather than simply swinging blindly in anger. Compare this to the Orca encounters described throughout this story. Every defense you have learned about, the crushing tail, the bone-rattling headbutt, the massive bite force, exists on a smaller, though still dangerous scale during a typical standoff with orcas. The Essex disaster shows what happens when that same raw power is deployed at its absolute maximum, unleashed by one of the largest sperm whales ever documented. This single historical event helps explain something that might otherwise seem exaggerated. When marine biologists describe a sperm whale's tail as capable of shattering bone, or its head as a natural battering ram, they are not using dramatic language for effect. They are describing, in more measured scientific terms, exactly the kind of force that once sank an entire ship built by experienced sailors specifically to survive the open ocean. For orcas, this history lesson exists in instinct rather than memory, of course. No killer whale alive today studied the Essex disaster before deciding whether to attack a sperm whale family. But millions of years of evolution have likely shaped orca behavior around exactly this kind of danger, encoding caution into their hunting instincts, the same way instinct teaches a young animal to avoid fire without ever needing to be burned first. The result is a predator that approaches sperm whales with more hesitation than it shows toward almost any other prey in the ocean, backing away far more often than pressing forward, guided by an instinct built on countless generations of encounters with an animal capable of delivering exactly the kind of force the Essex crew experience firsthand. Size and force are only part of the picture, though. A sperm whale does not just ram its way through danger. It bites too, and the numbers behind that bite are almost as staggering as everything you have learned so far. Deep in the lower jaw of a sperm whale sits a row of teeth built for one purpose, and it is not chewing. A sperm whale's lower jaw holds between 40 and 52 conical teeth, each one capable of growing over 8 inches long and weighing close to 2 pounds. Unlike most predators, sperm whales do not actually need these teeth for feeding. They mostly swallow squid and fish whole, using the teeth more for gripping large prey or, when necessary, for defense. Picture 8-inch teeth lined up along a jaw powerful enough to crush bone, set into an animal capable of clamping down with bite force, estimated among the strongest of any marine mammal on Earth. It is a weapon built for holding on to something and refusing to let go, no matter how hard that something struggles, nothing close to a tool for nibbling. During an encounter with orcas, this bite becomes another layer of risk that killer whales must consider. Even if an orca manages to get close enough to make contact, a sperm whale capable of clamping down with a bite this powerful could cause serious, potentially fatal injuries in return. There is no clean, risk-free way to attack an animal armed like this. Compare this to a much smaller, more familiar animal defending itself. A dog that feels threatened often does not attack right away. It shows its teeth first, a visible warning of what will happen if the threat continues. Sperm whales operate on a similar principle, except the stakes and the teeth involved are both dramatically larger. Marine biologists studying scars on wild sperm whales have found bite marks and toothrake patterns that suggest violent encounters throughout these animals' lives, evidence of conflicts with other sperm whales, occasional confrontations with large sharks, and sometimes injuries consistent with orca encounters that did not end peacefully. These scars tell a story written directly onto the whale's skin, proof that the ocean these animals live in is far from gentle. For an attacking orca, every one of these defensive tools stacks together into a single calculation. A punishing tail capable of shattering bone, a skull dense enough to have sunk wooden ships, a bite force strong enough to cause serious injury on contact. Individually, any one of these might be manageable. Combined, wrapped around an animal the size of a school bus, they add up to a threat most orcapods simply choose not to test. This raises an important question that the rest of this story needs to answer honestly. If sperm whales are this dangerous, why do orcas ever attempt an attack at all? The answer reveals something surprising about who exactly is doing the attacking in the first place. Not every killer whale in the ocean has ever attempted to hunt a sperm whale, and understanding why reveals something surprising about orcas themselves. Scientists have tracked these distinct orca cultures for decades, following specific family groups across generations and noting which prey each group consistently targets. Some populations near Antarctica specialize almost entirely in hunting seals off ice floes, using coordinated wave-making to wash their prey into the water. Populations in the Pacific Northwest often focus heavily on salmon. These are not random choices made fresh by each generation. They are traditions passed down and reinforced the same way a family might pass down a favourite recipe. Orcas are not one single type of hunter spread evenly across the world's oceans. Scientists have identified distinct populations, sometimes called ecotypes, that specialize in completely different diets depending on where they live and what prey is available. Some orca populations feed almost entirely on fish, especially salmon, and rarely if ever attack marine mammals at all. Other populations specialize specifically in hunting mammals, including seals, dolphins, and occasionally large whales. These mammal-hunting orcas tend to travel in smaller, quieter groups, using stealth rather than the loud, constant calls that fish-hunting orcas rely on to track schools of prey. Sperm whale attacks, on the rare occasions they happen, come almost exclusively from this specialized group. Think of it like comparing a chef who only makes desserts to one who only grills steak. Both are skilled cooks, but you would not expect the pastry chef to suddenly start butchering meat with the same confidence. Orca populations show a similar kind of specialization, built through generations of learned behavior passed down within family groups rather than encoded directly into their genetics. This matters enormously for sperm whales. Most orcas passing through sperm whale territory have no interest in attacking them at all, simply because hunting large, dangerous marine mammals is not part of their learned hunting culture. Only the smaller subset of mammal hunting specialists represents any real threat, and even among that group, sperm whales are considered exceptionally difficult and risky targets compared to seals or smaller dolphins. Researchers studying these specialist pods have noted that successfully hunting large, dangerous prey appears to be a skill passed down through direct teaching. Older, experienced orcas showing younger members of the pod exactly how to approach a dangerous target without getting injured. This means an orca pod without an experienced elder may lack the specific knowledge needed to safely challenge a sperm whale family at all, regardless of how hungry they might be. This specialization helps explain why standoffs between orcas and sperm whales remain relatively rare events, even in parts of the ocean where both species overlap regularly. It is not that every orca avoids sperm whales through pure instinct. Many orcas simply never develop the specific skills or inclination needed to attempt the hunt in the first place. For the specialist pods that do attempt it, though, every encounter still comes down to the same brutal calculation. Is the potential meal worth the very real risk of serious injury? Scientists rarely get the chance to watch a full orca and sperm whale encounter unfold from beginning to end, which makes every recorded observation incredibly valuable. Most of what researchers know comes from a combination of sources: direct observation from research boats, underwater recordings picked up by hydrophones, and occasionally aerial footage captured by drones flying above the surface. Piecing together a complete picture often means combining several of these sources at once, since no single vantage point captures everything happening both above and below the waterline during a fast-moving encounter like this one. In documented cases published by marine researchers, a pattern tends to repeat itself with only small variations. Killer whales approach a sperm whale group cautiously at first, often circling from a distance while the sperm whales detect their presence and begin forming into their defensive Marguerite ring. This opening phase can last anywhere from several minutes to well over an hour, with neither side committing fully to the encounter. Once the orcas commit to testing the formation, their approach looks less like a single charge and more like a series of probing runs. Individual orcas dart toward the ring, peel away before getting within striking range of a tail, then regroup and try again from a slightly different angle. It is a calculated search for any small gap or weakness in the formation, driven by strategy rather than fear alone. Picture a group of kids trying to sneak past a strict hallway monitor at school, testing different routes, watching for the moment the monitor looks away. The orcas are running a very similar kind of probing search, except the stakes involve broken bones instead of detention. Throughout this process, sperm whales inside the formation continue clicking constantly, tracking every movement the orcas make. Researchers listening to underwater recordings during these standoffs describe an almost constant wall of sound, sharp clicks overlapping from multiple whales at once, creating what one team described as an underwater alarm system that never stops running for the entire duration of the encounter. When orcas do occasionally find an opening, the response from the sperm whale group is immediate and coordinated. Nearby adults shift position rapidly, closing the gap, sometimes accompanied by aggressive tail slaps or jaw snaps aimed directly at the approaching orca. In several documented cases, this rapid response was enough to convince attacking orcas to break off entirely, apparently deciding the opening was not worth the risk after all. Not every standoff ends this cleanly, though. When orcas persist for long enough, testing repeatedly over an extended period, the odds of eventually finding a genuine weakness increase. Exhaustion becomes a factor for both sides, and a formation that held perfectly for the first 30 minutes might show small cracks by the second hour. This raises an uncomfortable question worth sitting with, honestly. If the defense usually works, what does it actually cost the sperm whales on the rare occasions when it eventually fails? Even when orcas succeed against a large, dangerous whale, victory rarely comes cheap, and the evidence for this stretches beyond sperm whales alone. The blue whale hunt was not a solo effort either. Multiple orcas took turns during the attack, some driving the whale forward while others struck from different angles, trading off so that no single orca bore the full physical strain of the chase for too long. This kind of relay hunting, spreading exhaustion across an entire pod instead of concentrating it in one or two animals, appears to be exactly the kind of strategy needed to overcome prey this large, and it likely applies just as directly to any successful hunt against a sperm whale. In 2019, researchers off the coast of Western Australia documented something that had never been scientifically confirmed before: a pod of orcas successfully killing a blue whale, the largest animal to ever exist on this planet. The hunt was not quick. It stretched on for hours, involving repeated coordinated attacks from multiple orcas working in relentless shifts, tiring their massive target through sheer persistence rather than any single decisive strike. This single documented case reshaped how scientists understood orca hunting capability. If a coordinated pod could eventually bring down an animal as large as a blue whale, then in theory, sperm whales should be well within reach too. But theory and practice tell very different stories once you look closely at what these hunts actually require. Every extended hunt like this comes with a hidden cost that rarely gets discussed. Hours spent chasing and attacking a single target are hours not spent resting, socializing or searching for easier, safer prey elsewhere. Orcas burn enormous amounts of energy during a prolonged pursuit, and that energy needs to be replaced through the very meal they are currently risking injury to obtain. Think about training for hours at football practice, only to realize afterward that the energy spent nearly matched the calories you would gain from the meal waiting for you at home. For predators in the wild, this math has to work out in their favor consistently, or the entire population eventually starves despite technically winning individual hunts. Injuries compound this problem further. Even a successful hunt against a large defended target often leaves attacking orcas with cuts, bruises, or worse, wounds that take time and energy to heal, sometimes never fully recovering in an environment with no doctors and no rest days. A pod that successfully kills one sperm whale but loses a member to infection weeks later has not necessarily come out ahead in the long run. This is likely why, even among specialist orca pods capable of hunting large prey, sperm whales remain a rare target compared to seals, dolphins, or smaller whales that offer a similar meal with dramatically less risk attached. The math simply favours easier prey almost every single time, reserving sperm whale attacks for moments of genuine desperation or exceptionally favourable circumstances. Understanding this cost helps explain a pattern that shows up again and again throughout recorded encounters between these two species. More often than not, when the numbers stop favouring the orcas, they choose to walk away entirely, no matter how close they might have already come. Across every documented encounter between orcas and sperm whales, one outcome appears far more often than any other. The orcas leave, and nobody gets eaten. This is worth remembering the next time a nature show frames every predator encounter as a guaranteed kill waiting to happen. Real predation in the wild looks far messier and far less certain than most dramatic footage suggests. Failure is not the exception for a hunting predator. In many cases, failure is the normal outcome, and success is the rare exception that documentaries simply choose to show because it makes for better television. This pattern holds up consistently across different oceans and different orca populations, from the coast of California to the waters surrounding Sri Lanka and Australia. Researchers tracking these standoffs report that a clear majority end without a successful kill, orcas eventually breaking off their approach and swimming away toward different, less defended prey. Several factors combine to produce this outcome, and by now you already understand each one individually. The Marguerite Formation eliminates easy angles of attack. The tail carries enough force to seriously injure anything careless enough to get hit. The bite force and jaw snapping displays offer clear warnings before real violence even begins. Depth provides a genuine escape route no orca can follow, and the sheer size difference, especially against lone adult males, often makes the entire attempt not worth considering in the first place. Individually, any one of these defences might be manageable for a sufficiently motivated orca pod. Stacked together, they create a cumulative risk that tips the entire calculation firmly in the sperm whale's favour most of the time. Picture a video game boss fight, where the enemy has multiple defensive abilities stacked on top of each other. Beating a boss with one weakness might be straightforward. Beating one with 5 different defenses working together, each covering for the other's gaps, becomes a completely different challenge, one that punishes careless or impatient attackers severely. Orcas, being highly intelligent predators, appear to understand this calculation instinctively, even if no individual orca has ever consciously worked through the math the way a human scientist might. Generations of encounters, successes, failures, and injuries have likely shaped a deep inherited caution around sperm whale families, passed down the same way other hunting knowledge spreads through orca culture. This does not mean every orcapod backs down every single time. Hunger, desperation, or a rare opportunity where a calf strays dangerously far from the group can still tip the balance toward an attack. But as a general pattern across the species, retreat rather than confrontation appears to be the default response. There is one encounter, though, that stands apart from all the others, an event so strange that the scientists who witnessed it almost could not believe what they were seeing at first. It did not involve teeth or tails or a battle of raw strength at all. In early 2024, off the coast of Western Australia, a marine biologist named Jodie Lowe was recording a standoff between orcas and a group of sperm whales, when something happened that nobody in the boat expected. The research vessel had been following this particular pod of orcas for several days already, documenting their normal hunting behaviour along the coastline. Nobody on board expected that day to be any different from the ones before it. That is often how the most important scientific discoveries happen, through patient, repetitive observation that eventually catches something nobody was specifically looking for, far more often than through a carefully planned experiment. Encounters like this one are exactly why researchers spend countless hours on small boats, cameras ready, waiting for something worth recording. Most days bring nothing unusual at all, just whales travelling, feeding or resting exactly as expected. It is precisely because these standoffs are so rare and so unpredictable that a single well-documented encounter can completely reshape what scientists thought they understood about a species that has been studied for generations. The orcas had been pressing the sperm whale group for a while, testing the formation the same way you have already learned about throughout this story. The researchers watched the whales lock into their defensive ring, tails pointed outward, calves tucked safely toward the centre. It looked, at first, like a fairly typical standoff, tense, but familiar to anyone who studies these encounters. Then a large dark cloud began rising up from the centre of the sperm whale group, spreading rapidly through the surrounding water. From a distance, the colour and shape looked disturbingly familiar. The researchers on board briefly worried they were witnessing the aftermath of a successful bloody kill, the dark cloud resembling exactly what a large blood plume might look like spreading from an injured animal. A closer look revealed something completely different, and far stranger than anyone had anticipated. The cloud was not blood at all. It was waste, released deliberately and in enormous quantity by the sperm whales themselves. Because these whales feed heavily on squid, their waste carries a distinct reddish-brown colour easily mistaken for blood at a distance, especially in the chaos of an active predator encounter. Scientists had documented this kind of defensive release before in other tense situations, but nobody had previously captured it happening in direct response to an active orca attack, released at exactly the right moment to interfere with the hunt itself. What the research team witnessed next would go on to reshape how biologists understood one of the strangest defenses in the entire animal kingdom. The sperm whales did not stop at simply releasing the cloud into the water. They immediately began thrashing their massive tails through it, and that single action turned a strange, unexpected moment into something that looked almost deliberately engineered to end the fight entirely. Every defense covered so far in this story relies on strength, speed, or size. This one relies on something far stranger, and it may be one of the most effective tools in a sperm whale's entire arsenal. Scientists call it defensive defecation, and the name describes exactly what it sounds like. This kind of defense is not unique to whales either. Several other animals across the natural world rely on a similar principle, releasing waste or fluid specifically to confuse or repel a predator at the exact moment danger closes in. An octopus squirts ink. A certain species of caterpillar flings its waste several body lengths away to avoid attracting predators drawn by the smell. Sperm whales appear to be doing something related, though scaled up to a size no other animal on the planet could match. When under serious threat, sperm whales release a large quantity of waste directly into the surrounding water, then use their powerful tails to churn and spread it through the immediate area as quickly as possible. Picture stirring a spoonful of paint into a full bathtub of water, watching it spread into a thick, cloudy mess that makes it almost impossible to see anything clearly beneath the surface. Now scale that effect up to the size of an entire ocean encounter, and you start to understand exactly what the attacking orcas suddenly found themselves swimming through. During the 2024 encounter you just learned about, researchers watched the largest sperm whale in the group release this cloud first, followed immediately by aggressive tail movements that spread the waste rapidly through the surrounding water. Within moments, the clear blue water around the standoff had transformed into a murky reddish-brown haze that made it difficult to see more than a few feet in any direction. For orcas relying partly on sight to track their target and coordinate an attack, this sudden loss of visibility created an immediate problem. One orca that pushed forward into the cloud emerged moments later, completely covered in waste, and according to the researchers watching, quickly peeled away from the fight entirely, seemingly eager to put distance between itself and whatever had just happened. There is likely more happening here than simple visual confusion, though scientists are still studying exactly how much each factor contributes. Squid ink, released by actual squid as a defense against predators, is known to interfere with a predator's sense of smell in addition to blocking sight. Sperm whale waste, built largely from digested squid, may carry a similar disruptive effect on any predator relying on scent or taste to track prey through the water. Whatever the exact mechanism, the results speak for themselves. The orcas that entered the cloud did not press forward with the same confidence they had shown moments earlier. Something about the experience changed their calculation entirely, and what happened next surprised even the scientists who had spent years studying these animals. One orca, coated in the murky cloud, had already pulled back, but the pod was not finished testing the sperm whale group just yet. The researchers watching from the boat described the entire scene as almost surreal, a mix of genuine scientific excitement and pure disbelief at what was unfolding in front of their cameras. Years of studying these animals had prepared them for aggression, for tension, for the slow, patient standoff typical of these encounters. Nothing had prepared them for the sight of an apex predator fleeing from a cloud of whale waste, and the footage quickly became one of the most talked about pieces of marine wildlife video in recent memory. A second orca pressed forward, apparently attempting to break through the rosette formation while visibility remained low, perhaps hoping the confusion would work in its favour rather than against it. This time, the largest sperm whale in the group responded again, releasing a second burst of waste directly toward the approaching attacker. The timing here matters enormously. It looked, according to the researchers who witnessed it, like a targeted response rather than a random panicked release, deployed specifically at the moment a second orca made its move, almost as if the whale understood exactly when the defense would be most effective. Think about a skunk facing a persistent predator. A skunk does not simply spray constantly at nothing. It waits, assesses the threat, and releases its spray at the precise moment an attacker gets close enough for the defense to actually work. Evidence from this encounter suggests sperm whales may be capable of something similar, timing their release for maximum disruption, rather than simply reacting blindly to danger. The second orca, like the first, ended up covered in the spreading cloud and pulled back from the formation shortly afterward. Within a short period, the remaining orcas in the pod began retreating as well, eventually swimming away from the area entirely, leaving the sperm whale group intact and apparently uninjured. Researchers reviewing the footage afterward could not find any clear evidence that the orcas had successfully injured or killed any member of the sperm whale group during the entire encounter. The hunt, which had begun with a sustained, aggressive pursuit, ended instead with a group of orcas swimming away covered in reddish-brown waste, apparently deciding the entire effort was no longer worth continuing. This single documented case does not prove that defensive defecation works every single time, against every single orca pod, in every possible situation. Scientists are careful to note that this behaviour has been recorded only a small number of times, and other factors might have influenced why this particular pod chose to retreat when they did. But the footage remains one of the clearest examples ever captured of a completely unexpected defense, working exactly as intended, turning what should have been a serious threat into a strange, almost comedic retreat, driven by an animal willing to use every single tool available to protect its family. Throughout the entire 2024 encounter, One particular whale stood out from the rest of the group, and its actions may have single-handedly changed the outcome of the entire standoff. Size likely played a role in this decision too. A larger whale can store and release a greater volume of waste at once, producing a bigger, more disruptive cloud than a smaller member of the group could manage. If defensive defecation depends partly on overwhelming volume to create real confusion, it would make sense for the largest, most capable individual to take the lead during a genuine crisis, letting smaller whales conserve their own reserves for later in the standoff if the fight continued. Researchers watching the footage noted that the largest sperm whale present, likely a mature adult, positioned itself at the center of the defensive action throughout the encounter. This whale released the waste cloud twice, timing both releases at the exact moments when orcas pressed closest to the group. This kind of behavior raises an interesting question about leadership within sperm whale families. Earlier in this story, you learned that these units function through close cooperation rather than a single dominant leader barking orders. But documented cases like this one suggest that certain individuals, perhaps older, more experienced whales, may take on a more active defensive role during moments of genuine crisis. Picture a group project where most team members contribute equally most of the time, but when a genuine emergency hits, one person naturally steps forward to handle the situation directly while everyone else supports from their positions. Something similar may have played out during this encounter, with one experienced whale taking direct action, while the rest of the family maintained the protective ring around the vulnerable calves at the center. Whether this represents true individual leadership, or simply reflects which whale happened to be positioned closest to the threat at the right moment, remains an open question that researchers continue to investigate. Sperm whale behavior during high-stress encounters is still not fully understood, partly because opportunities to observe these standoffs directly, with cameras rolling and researchers present, remain incredibly rare. What is clear, though, is that this single whale's actions appear to directly influence the outcome of the entire encounter. Two precisely timed releases, followed immediately by aggressive tail movements to spread the resulting cloud, coincided directly with two separate orcas abandoning their approach and pulling back from the fight. This raises a fascinating possibility worth sitting with. If a single sperm whale can end a serious predator encounter through nothing more than a well-timed, well-aimed defensive display, it suggests these animals possess a level of tactical awareness that goes beyond simple instinct. It looks, at least from the outside, remarkably close to a conscious decision, made under pressure, by an animal that somehow understood exactly what its family needed in that exact moment. Sperm whales are not the only animals in the ocean willing to use an unconventional defense like this one, though. A short distance away, in the same waters, another species of whale appears to have learned a strikingly similar trick. Sperm whales are not alone in facing down orcas through unconventional defense. Not far from where the 2024 encounter took place, researchers have documented pilot whales using strikingly similar tactics against the exact same threat. Pilot whale pods are sometimes even larger than sperm whale family units, occasionally numbering in the hundreds when several smaller groups merge together during periods of high risk. A group that size creates a genuinely intimidating obstacle, and researchers have noted that orcas approaching massive pilot whale gatherings often show a level of caution similar to what they display around sperm whale families, despite pilot whales lacking the same crushing tail strength sperm whales rely on. Pilot whales, despite their name, are actually large members of the dolphin family, though they share several important traits with sperm whales, including tight matriarchal family groups and a willingness to defend each other fiercely against predators. When threatened, researchers have watched pilot whale pods form their own version of a defensive circle, tightening together with calves protected at the center, while adults face outward toward the danger. In one documented case, a large pod of pilot whales, growing to several dozen strong, gathered near a coastline when orcas were spotted nearby, circling in a wide, cautious arc and making shallow dives while maintaining their tight formation for hours. The sheer number of whales involved, combined with their coordinated movement, appeared to convince the orcas that testing this particular group was not worth the effort. Think about the difference between a single unlocked door and an entire building full of alarms, cameras, and locked doors every few feet. A predator testing the first option might succeed through simple persistence. A predator facing the second option has to weigh whether the effort required is even worth attempting in the first place. Pilot whales, much like sperm whales, seem to rely on exactly this kind of layered, exhausting defense to discourage attacks before they ever fully begin. This pattern showing up across two completely different whale species suggests something important about evolution in the open ocean. When facing a shared, intelligent predator like the orca, similar solutions tend to emerge independently, shaped by the same basic pressures even in animals that are not closely related. Tight family bonds, coordinated group defense, and a willingness to protect vulnerable members at direct personal risk appear again and again throughout the ocean's most successful prey species. Orcas, in turn, have had to develop increasingly sophisticated hunting strategies to overcome these defenses, probing for weaknesses, testing formations, and passing successful techniques down through generations of learned behavior. This back and forth between predator and prey has not stayed still for even a single moment throughout millions of years of shared history in these waters. Every defense covered throughout this story did not appear overnight. Each one represents millions of years of pressure, response, and counter-response between two of the ocean's most intelligent predators. Fossil evidence offers a small window into just how long this competition has been running. Ancient relatives of both modern orcas and modern sperm whales have been swimming in Earth's oceans for tens of millions of years, meaning some version of this same basic standoff, predator against defended prey, has likely been playing out since long before humans existed to witness any of it, let alone study it with cameras and underwater microphones. Scientists refer to this kind of ongoing back and forth as an evolutionary arms race, a term borrowed from the constant competition between nations racing to develop stronger weapons than their rivals. In nature, the weapons are not missiles or tanks. They are teeth, tails, brains, and behaviors, each one shaped generation after generation by whichever side is currently losing ground. Consider how this likely played out over deep time. Early sperm whale ancestors that lacked strong family bonds or coordinated defenses would have been far easier targets for ancient predators, leaving fewer descendants behind to pass on their genes. Meanwhile, whichever individuals happened to cooperate more effectively, forming tighter groups or developing more powerful tails, survived more consistently and passed those advantages down to their offspring. Orcas faced the same pressure from the opposite direction. Individuals that developed smarter, more coordinated hunting strategies against difficult prey like sperm whales would have eaten more consistently than those relying on simple direct attacks that rarely succeeded. Over countless generations, this pushed orca intelligence and hunting sophistication forward, matching pace with the defenses sperm whales continued developing in response. Picture two athletes locked in a decades-long rivalry, each one constantly training harder, developing new strategies and studying the other's weaknesses after every match. Neither one ever truly wins for long, because every advantage discovered by one side eventually gets countered by the other. This rivalry between orcas and sperm whales has been running for millions of years, far longer than any human sports rivalry could ever hope to last. This ongoing competition likely explains why both species rank among the most intelligent, socially complex animals in the entire ocean. Facing off against a smart, adaptable opponent for millions of years does not favour simple, predictable behaviour. It favours exactly the kind of large brains, complex communication, and flexible strategy you have learned about throughout this entire story. The arms race has not stopped, simply because humans started studying it closely. Every encounter recorded by researchers, including the strange waste-filled standoff you learned about earlier, represents one more data point in a competition that will likely keep evolving long after everyone reading this has grown old. But this raises one final important question. If attacking a sperm whale carries this much risk, what actually pushes an orcapod to attempt it in the first place? Given everything you have learned so far, a fair question emerges. If the risks are this severe, why would any orcapod ever choose to attack a sperm whale family at all? Climate shifts add another layer to this picture. As ocean temperatures change and prey distribution shift along with them, some orca populations are being pushed to hunt species they historically avoided, simply because their traditional prey has moved elsewhere or declined in number. Researchers studying long-term orca behaviour suspect that attacks on unusual or difficult prey, including sperm whales, may become slightly more common as this pressure continues building across the world's oceans. The answer, more often than not, comes down to hunger and opportunity working together. Orcas, like every predator in the ocean, need a certain amount of food to survive, and their usual prey is not always guaranteed to be available. Seal populations shift with the seasons. Fish schools move unpredictably. During lean periods, when easier meals become scarce, the calculation around riskier prey like sperm whales can shift dramatically. Think about how your own decisions change when you're truly, uncomfortably hungry versus simply a little peckish. A small snack might not be worth the effort of walking downstairs when you're only slightly hungry, but that same effort suddenly seems reasonable after skipping meals for most of the day. Orcas facing genuine food scarcity may become willing to accept risks they would normally avoid entirely. Opportunity plays an equally important role. Most successful or attempted attacks on sperm whales happen when a vulnerable individual, usually a calf, becomes separated or exposed, even briefly, from the protective formation. An experienced orca pod, patiently watching a sperm whale group for hours, is essentially waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity, a brief lapse that dramatically shifts the risk calculation in their favour. Group size matters too. A larger, more experienced orca pod, especially one led by individuals who have successfully hunted large prey before, faces significantly better odds than a smaller or less experienced group attempting the same hunt. This is likely part of why successful attacks on sperm whales remain associated primarily with specific specialist pods rather than orcas in general. There is also a seasonal element worth considering. Sperm whale calves are most vulnerable in their first year of life, before they develop the strength and diving ability of a full-grown adult. Orca pods that track sperm whale migration patterns may specifically target periods when young, less experienced calves are more likely to be present within a travelling family group. None of these factors guarantee an attack will happen, or that it will succeed if attempted. But together, they explain why these encounters, while relatively rare, continue happening at all across the world's oceans, driven by the same basic survival pressure that shapes nearly every predator and prey relationship on this planet. Behind every single decision to approach or avoid a sperm whale family, an invisible calculation is taking place, one built from millions of years of instinct rather than conscious math. Human fishing and shipping activity has added new variables to this ancient calculation as well. Noise from passing ships can interfere with the very same clicks and calls sperm whale families rely on to coordinate their defense, potentially making formations slightly less effective than they were before oceans grew this loud with engine traffic. Researchers studying this impact worry that a defense refined over millions of years could be quietly undermined by a threat these whales never evolved to handle in the first place. Every predator in the wild operates under a basic rule, whether or not any individual animal understands it explicitly. The energy and risk spent hunting must, on average, be worth less than the energy and safety gained from a successful meal. Break that rule too often, and an entire population starts to decline, regardless of how impressive any single successful hunt might look from the outside. Sperm whales tilt this calculation dramatically compared to almost any other prey available in the open ocean. A seal offers a reasonable meal for relatively low risk. A sperm whale offers a potentially larger meal, but wrapped in layers of risk that stack on top of each other. A crushing tail, a bone-jarring headbutt, a punishing bite, a formation that eliminates easy angles, an escape route into depths no orca can follow, and, as researchers recently discovered, a defense built entirely around confusion and waste. Picture a locked safe sitting next to an unlocked drawer, both containing roughly similar amounts of cash. Even a determined thief will likely choose the unlocked drawer nearly every time, since the effort and risk required to crack the safe rarely justifies the reward when an easier option sits right there. Orcas appear to apply this exact logic to sperm whales, choosing easier prey the vast majority of the time. This hidden cost extends beyond the immediate encounter as well. An orca injured during a failed or even successful attack on a sperm whale carries that injury forward, potentially affecting its ability to hunt other prey for weeks or months afterward. In a highly social species where every member contributes to the group's overall success, a single serious injury can ripple outward, affecting the entire pod's ability to survive and reproduce. This explains something that might otherwise seem strange. Orcas sit at the very top of the ocean's food chain, capable of hunting nearly anything they choose. Yet against one specific remarkable animal, that confidence consistently gives way to caution, probing, and more often than not retreat. This single relationship between two of the smartest, most socially complex predators in the entire ocean offers a window into something much larger about how power actually works beneath the waves. After everything you have learned throughout this story, one central idea stands out clearly above all the rest. Being the strongest predator in an ecosystem does not mean winning every single fight. Orcas remain, by almost every measure, one of the most dominant hunters the ocean has ever produced. They take down sharks. They coordinate hunts more sophisticated than almost any other animal on the planet. Against nearly everything else in the sea, that dominance translates directly into consistent, successful hunting. Sperm whales prove that dominance has limits, and that real power in nature rarely comes from a single advantage. It comes from stacking multiple defenses together until the cost of attacking simply outweighs any possible reward. Size matters, but so does teamwork. Raw strength matters, but so does the intelligence needed to coordinate that strength effectively under pressure. Even something as strange and unexpected as a cloud of waste can tip an entire encounter when deployed at exactly the right moment. Think back to the very first part of this story, watching a pod of orcas approach the ocean's most powerful hunter, then quietly turn away. That single moment captures something true about nature, far beyond just these two species. Power is rarely absolute. It shifts depending on who you are facing, how prepared they are, and how much risk you're genuinely willing to accept for an uncertain reward. This same pattern shows up throughout the natural world in different forms. A lion, unquestionably dominant over most of the savanna, still avoids a full-grown elephant. A shark, feared throughout the ocean, still keeps its distance from a pod of orcas working together. Dominance in nature is almost always relative, shaped entirely by context rather than existing as some fixed, permanent rank. For sperm whales specifically, this story is still being written. Scientists continue documenting new encounters every year, each one adding small pieces to a much larger picture that remains far from complete. The waste-filled standoff you learned about earlier in this story was the first of its kind ever captured on camera, which means there is a very real chance that other defenses, other strategies and other surprises remain completely undiscovered, waiting somewhere in the deep, dark water for the next research team lucky enough to be watching at exactly the right moment. What began as a simple question, why do orcas keep their distance from sperm whales, has revealed an entire hidden world of strategy, sacrifice, and evolutionary competition playing out largely unseen beneath the surface of every ocean on this planet. The next time you picture the killer whale as the undisputed ruler of the sea, remember the family of whales that, more often than not, makes that ruler think twice.